So I am one of the residents at Monastic Academy. I think most of you know who I am. I see a couple new faces that I don't know. So I'm just curious, how many of you here have actively spent time working on posture? Show of hands. People in brown shirts not included. I, until a few years ago, hadn't. I had really, really, really bad posture. I worked in IT for the better part of a decade, long hours behind a computer and very comfortable chairs that allowed me to forget that I had a body. I'd be pretty hunched over. I actually saw a picture of myself on the internet a few days ago where I couldn't believe how far my head was forward. I looked like a turtle. So it was, when I say that, I'm actually not exaggerating. And it never occurred to me that posture could be important. It just seems like something that like aristocrats and like British people did or something. I don't know. Like learn which fork I should be eating my salad with. That and posture seemed really similar in my mind. And I, ignored it. I didn't care. And in the process of doing that, my body ended up very tense and very uncomfortable. So we're going to talk about posture today. So there are actually different schools of thought around posture. Anyone who's done both Tai Chi and yoga has probably run across this. They have very opposite views about how you should hold your chest. So there are different ways of doing the same thing. But ultimately the goal with posture, one of the goals is to allow the body to relax. So I'm going to give you one way of doing posture. If you've learned other ones, that's great. You don't have to do what I'm asking. I'm just giving you one way of looking at posture. So the first thing that we'll do is start with a stable base. So this is something that's a little bit different when you're sitting in a chair than when you're sitting on a meditation cushion, so I can kind of go over both. But on a meditation cushion, your legs are going to probably be folded or bent in some way. Not probably, they are. You're not going to be on a meditation cushion like this. But you want to have basically some of your weight is going to be in your feet, and some of it is going to be over what's called your perineum. So that's the area between your anus and your genitals. So your weight's going to be on your sit bones, and then you'll have some of your weight on your feet, and these points of contact create a triangle that allow you to be stable. So this is really just the foundation, but the first, as far as I can tell, each part sort of builds on the other ones, so you need all of them in succession to create the most stable posture. I do not have the most stable posture, but I'm going to bet out of the residents I've probably spent more time on posture than most residents, and I still have worse posture. So a lot of effort, a lot of time spent using it, not quite as good of results yet. So, but the next thing that you want is you want your tailbone to be tucked down. So it'll be slightly pointed in, and this will once again allow some of the weight to be in your legs, and it'll allow this triangle to be even more stable. The next point is one that we'll probably explore quite a bit in the guided meditation, and that is being centered. So centered means both forward and backward, and left and right. So if you want to go along with me here, you just play around with your center a little bit. But this one has been a very big part of my posture practice as of late, so we'll talk about that. The next thing is that you want your chest to be open. This doesn't mean close your shoulder blades, bring them together really tight. Just you want your heart to be open, your chest to be open. You don't want to force it in any way, but just nice and relaxed. And then the last thing is that you want the back of your neck to be open, which sort of looks like your chin is slightly tucked. And if you imagine that there's a string pulling up on the top of your head, it'll open that particular spot in the back of your the base of your skull. So feel free to to keep your posture during this if you like. Residents, keep your posture. Pavel. All right. So, one of the reasons that I came to meditation in the first place was different from what I can tell from a lot of people. Most people that I've talked to about their reason for starting to meditate are things like stress reduction, just learning to deal with their lives. Many people come to it because of their religious practices. But I came to it for a lot of reasons, but one of the bigger ones was really I was looking for the big spiritual experience. You know, I'd read books where that happened. I'd talked to people who had been very long-term meditators. And I had had some of these experiences using substances like ayahuasca. And I knew that you could do that without having to use any of those substances. So I got into transcendental meditation, and then about a year later, I sat my first Goenka retreat, and then I think less than a year after that, I was living in a monastery. So kind of a quick progression there. But one of the most important things that I've learned since being at the Monastic Academy is that oftentimes the things that have the biggest impact on our lives don't come with a big spiritual experience. I would say that I've had two insights that I would say have been significant on my life since I've been there, and both of them have been really boring. Both of them actually happen to be related to posture, how I hold my body. And like I said at the beginning of this, I put a lot of time and effort into posture. And that really started from somebody that I met about 4 years ago who changed my life, and his name was Brian Neal. So Brian Neal is an acupuncturist and an avid Tai Chi fan and teacher, and along with several other arts that have impacted my life quite a bit. And he's a really interesting guy. When you go see Brian, you never know what you're going to get. You might get a conversation about aliens or who killed JFK or Chi or anything in between. He's just a very unique person. One of my favorite things about him is that I can never expect what it's going to be like when I talk to him. And he's just got this warm, loving heart and this passion for health and for people, and he infected me with it. And he started teaching me Qigong and standing postures. He was my first introduction to standing postures. So in the internal martial arts, they have particular postures that they'll have you hold for long periods of time. And when I say long periods of time, some of these postures are held for hours. It's pretty common for benchmark for people early on in one of the internal martial arts to hold a posture called Wu Wei for about 8 hours a day. And that's when you start moving out of the beginner stage. So he introduced me to these, and I could never imagine why would anybody want to stand still for 8 hours. Like, that just seems ridiculous. Why? Until I started doing it. So the posture that he had me standing in was called Santi, and it's pretty strange looking. It doesn't seem like it would have any real use, but basically, in this particular posture, there's a lot going on that you can't see. There's places that I have to check in on posture at my feet, my ankles, my knees, my hips, my lower back, my arms, the top of my head, my tongue, the inside and outside of my shoulders. So it requires a lot of awareness, and it's very hard. It looks like it's not that hard, but your muscles start to shake, and then your mind goes, why am I doing this? This is stupid. I don't even like it. Never going to be any use that comes out of it. And you just have to stand through that. And when you stand through it, interesting things start to happen. The most interesting thing that's happened from that was starting to feel the inside of my body. My relationship with my body, as you can probably guess from my IT story at the beginning, has been pretty disconnected. I had somebody ask me why, or where are my feet? And I said, they're down there. And if you think about that, that's strange, because that means that I think I'm up here and my feet are down there. And part of the reason for that is because I never felt them. I couldn't tell the difference between my toes. So quickly, I would like to see, is anybody here able to distinguish between all of their toes based on feel alone? Sanshin, one avid meditator. So that was fascinating to me. So I got into these postures. I started doing these martial arts that deal with working with the inside of the body and learning to feel. But I'd never worked with posture in my seated practice until I came to Monastic Academy. And there was a resident who was the sit leader for my very first meditation retreat at the old location in Johnson. And he pulled me aside on the very first day of the retreat and said, your posture is terrible, and I want to help you work on it. And he gave me some advice, and my head at that point was like this, and my shoulders were very rounded. And he said, I really want you to focus on keeping your head up and back, and then having your chest open. And he, during our retreats, there's a particular group of people who get corrected on things like this during the sits. So anytime that I would start slouching and stuff like this, he would correct me and I'd go back. So I spent an entire retreat doing pretty much just this over and over and over again. And it taught me some really interesting things. Two that really stand out. Or two interesting things happened, I guess is probably a better way to put it. One of them is that I could listen to my mind going, this is terrible. I'm in so much pain. I don't want to do this. I just want to stay like this. This is just how my body likes being. And I'd listen to that, and then I'd go like this, and then Tashin would go, Cameron, posture. I'd be like, oh. And eventually I started to notice that my mind would do that, and I could still correct it. And then I would stay with better posture, and my mind would still be complaining about it, and this is terrible, I'm in pain. And I started to recognize that I don't actually have to do what my mind says. That was a really important moment in my life where I realized, oh, my mind can say something and I don't have to listen to it. I'm somebody who's listened to my mind on pretty much everything it's ever said, whether it's I'm right and you're wrong, or I should have that fourth piece of pizza. I've been controlled entirely by that, and it felt extremely freeing to have a moment where I could hear my mind saying, don't do that, and I could do it anyway. And continuing with this during that retreat, what that led to was by the end of the retreat, so just 7 days of really working on this, there was a knot that was between my shoulder blades that was enormous. When I would do yoga, there's oftentimes you'll put your hands above your head to do this. My arms trying to do that looked like this. And by the end of that retreat, the knot in my back was gone, and I could touch my hands together and put them up. And that has lasted for the 2 years that I've been here, and as far as I can tell, will last into the future. So that was a really big moment to me to really look at how posture affected my life, because that knot was really painful. It affected my range of motion. It affected me emotionally. And I immediately felt like I had more energy. So I took that and I refocused my life around my standing postures. So for a long time, well, that's probably not the right way to put it. I started focusing more on them. And I started talking to my teacher back in Ohio about them further, and he started talking to me more and more about bone stacking. So have any of you seen people do acro yoga, like partner yoga? I had a really interesting experience with my stepsister, who's, I'm not going to guess her weight because she would probably hate that, but she's very skinny and very small. And I watched her with my sister's friend, who was a bodybuilder, like a guy who's about 6'6" and easily over 300 pounds. I watched her on her back, just balancing him and like twisting him around and things like that. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, this girl she's tiny. I don't know how she's doing this. And she also happened to mention to me bone stacking. So basically, our bodies are meant to carry weight in particular ways. The things in our body that are meant to carry weight are our bones. And what we have a tendency to do, specifically people in this culture, but also people who live very different lives than we do, is we start to, over time, start carrying weight in different parts of our body that aren't designed to do that. Muscles are the most gross that happens, but it happens in other ways as well. So our muscles tense up around our bones. So shoulder tension, back tension, any of these places. If you have tension that you can't let go of, one of the things that may be happening, there's other things too, is that your body is not holding your weight the right way. So I started learning about that and how it affects the body in general. And that led me to something that happened a little over a month ago, which would be the second posture-related thing that I would say has probably impacted my life even more than the first one. It's really boring though. I'm going to say it and you're just going to go, oh, that's stupid. You're not going to imagine that this could have affected my life as much as it has. But I realized that when I let my body go wherever it wants, so right now this is about where my body wants to be, my weight is about 2 inches behind my actual center. Was anyone dazzled by that? No? Yeah, it's really boring, right? How could that affect my life so much? Well, what I can tell you is that when my weight is actually centered over my hips, my neck and my back don't have to tense, and they actually relax on their own without any effort. When I let my body go where it wants to go, in order to maintain that slight leaning back, my lower back, my butt muscles, my mid-back, my shoulders, and my neck all contract. That's 2 inches. And my body is still trained to do that. So every time I sit down, I don't think about it. I go, you know. So I'm still in a phase of reintegrating this into my life, but something else interesting happened from that too. I started to recognize that let me put this a different way. My relationship with my body, exploring what it feels like, has been one of, I really want to experience what happens, and then I do, and it's really painful. So then I'm like, and then I try to experience it again, and it's like, So it's sort of a push-pull between wanting to feel what's actually happening and just the reality of what's actually there. And since I realized this about being, about 2 inches behind my actual center, it's actually started to feel like an exploration. It's like, oh, what happens if I do this? And I've started to see little relationships between things, and it's become fun and interesting and beautiful, instead of this terrible thing that's happening to me that I can't make stop. So I am giving this talk tonight to try and motivate or possibly inspire you to focus on posture. It's boring. It's not that interesting. It doesn't sound sexy. It's not going to have a big spiritual experience from it, but it might actually improve your life. The amount of tension in my body that's released in the last month is shocking to me, and it's affected my quality of life. It's made me actually want to get out of bed in the morning instead of just laying there like, oh, I'm so tired. And I just want to share that. I think it's helpful and useful, and really, I think there's just a few points that I want to emphasize. And one of them is that posture will only improve if you work on it. Whatever the posture our bodies naturally take, if we don't put effort into it, will be maintained or worsened if we don't put effort into it. It's like anything else, it can be hard, but it's really worth doing. The second thing is that depending on your body, you might feel pain. I felt a lot of pain. Experiencing posture, like actually feeling what my body's doing, for me has been very painful. It won't be for everybody. Some people have fantastic posture. Sanshin is like a rock over there of perfect posture. I don't know how much pain he deals with, but he makes it look easy. I don't make it look easy. I experience a lot of pain, but I can tell you that the exploration has been worth it. And the third thing is that it can actually affect your day-to-day life. It's not just something to do for the cushion so that when I sit I can have an easier meditation practice. Like, for me, it's brought actual joy into my life, the exploration itself, but also, my body's not using extra energy that isn't necessary to hold itself up. That energy can go somewhere else, and that may be listening to the person that I'm talking to, or focusing on something that I'm passionate about. So it has a real impact. So hopefully you've been a little intrigued by this, and we can take some time to explore it together in the silence period. So. So let's go ahead and start with a nice, slow, deep breath. Just say hello to your body there. Get in touch with it. Nice and relaxed. The way that we sit tends to be the way that we stand, so you can do anything that I'm recommending either seated or standing today. Put your attention on your feet. Feel where they contact the ground. No need to look for anything special, just pay attention to what's there. Do they feel the same? Is the weight on the same on both feet? Now bring your attention up to your knees. Can you feel your knees? What experience is available right now when your attention is on your knees? Can you feel more happening in one knee than the other? Or do you feel about the same? Now bring your attention up to your butt and your pelvis. Just feel where you're contacting the chair. If you're standing, feel the relationship between your hips and your knees. How is your body holding your weight? Where is it centered? The answer to that question may not be obvious. Where is your weight being held? So we're going to explore this. The easiest way to explore this is to make things more obvious. So, everybody lean to the right. And notice how this affects your body. Does anything feel tired? Did anything tense? Try to hold it, but also take care of your body. Don't push it past what you need to do. How did this affect your feet? Where is your weight centered now? Go ahead and come back to center. Shake it off a little bit, your body relax. Move around a little bit, stand up if you need to. Clear the cobwebs out. Was it hard to hold that? All right, well, bear with me. We're going to try this again. I bet you can guess what we're going to do now. Left. We're going to do left. All right, so take a minute to check in with your body. And then when you're ready, lean left. Make sure you're still breathing. Deep breaths. All right, come back to center. Do what you need to do to take care of your body. Relax it, shake it, do a cartwheel. Outside. If you notice anything in your body that feels like fatigued muscle, that's a good indication of how your body was holding the weight while you were leaning. That may show up delayed, so you may have that show up tomorrow or the day after. It's a nice little surprise. Remind you of your time here with us. So now check in with your body and see how that feels. And play around with left and right at a more subtle level. Lean a little left, lean a little right, and try and find a place where it feels like you're pretty balanced. But start out by actually moving. It's a lot easier if you move and find what isn't right for your body to find what is right.
The same go for front and back.
We'll do that next.
Is your back touching the back of the chair?
Mm-mm. Now we're going to move on to forward and backwards. So everybody lean slightly back until your weight is obviously behind your tailbone. And for this particular exercise, it is helpful if that leaning back action puts your back on the chair. That's going to take some of the weight, so if you want to really explore this, it's easier to do if you're not touching the back of the chair. If you need to, that's perfectly okay. If you want to, that's perfectly okay, as long as you're not wearing a brown shirt. How is your body holding the weight when it's behind your tailbone? Is this more or less comfortable than how I was sitting before? All right, come back to center. Take care of your body in whatever way you need to. When you're ready, we're going to lean forward. With this one, do your best to keep your back straight. Specifically, keep your neck in line with your back as much as possible. How does your body adjust to hold your weight in this way? I'm going to ring the bell, and we're going to move into a movement period until 6:05. So you can play around with this in motion. So now that we've explored forward and backward, let's put them together and play around with both. So lean forward and lean backward and try and find a place that feels balanced. I would suggest ignoring the feeling of leaning, because your center, the place that actually feels balanced, may feel further forward or backward than you're used to leaning. or you're used to sitting. So just try and find the place that feels balanced. So now you have a place that's balanced forward and backward, and you have a place that's balanced left and right. So now let's put those two together and find a single point that feels stable, balanced. we're looking for the spot that is centered side to side and front to back. Now I want you to let your body move into whatever way you sit comfortably. Check in with your body. In a few moments, we're going to move back into that spot. We want to notice the difference between how our body sits comfortably and the place that's actually the most efficient for our body to sit. And I want you to make this transition over and over and over and over again, so that you can feel the difference. So you can explore what happens in your body when you let your body go back to its natural place, the place that's natural for your body at this time, and the place where it's most efficient for your body to sit. So go ahead and move back to the place that's centered forward and backwards.
Can you define efficient?
Centered, the weight is being held most by your bones and least by your muscles. Now go ahead and relax again. And just play around with this transition. You can do it as many or as few times as you like, but treat it as an exploration. So go ahead and shake your body out, stand up. We have just a few minutes more to explore this. So we want to move back into that place that's balanced left and right and forward and backwards. And we want to focus on relaxation. How can you bring more relaxation into this position? And this might be with your breath. This might be with focusing on rest in your body, relaxation. You may have other methods that work for you from your own life experience. Just focus on relaxing. Now we'll move into question and answer period. You're welcome to ask me questions, or you're welcome to share your experience. Or if there's nothing, we can sit in silence. So.
Just give me again, like, the why we're doing this. A thumbnail sketch as to why.
Can you clarify what you mean by why we're doing this? Do you mean the question and
Yeah.
answer period, or the?
No, why do we sit? Why do we sit efficiently? What's the benefit?
So one way to look at it would be that any effort that you're putting into maintaining your body in an upright position is effort that you can't put into your focus. So, in meditation, that means that some of your focus is spread out. In a more practical sense, if you have tension in your body that you maintain all the time, it takes away, first of all, it actually burns energy. You have to eat more, or you're also typically exhausted faster. So just being able to relax is just a very good skill to have. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess it's just sort of a follow-up question. I imagine if you're not sitting like stacked, like the bone stacking,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably using up excess energy too. I
Mm-hmm.
imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
Question 1 is what you do with your arms. Something with like my arms kind of forward, but then I'm like, what do I do with my arms? That's one question. Do you want to answer them one at a time?
How related are they?
They're related. They're all part of the body.
Okay. That's a good answer. And that's actually, you've answered your own question
Okay.
in some degree.
The
So,
other one is, do you clench your stomach muscles at all? Because I notice that when I do clench my stomach muscles, I have the sense that my posture is better. But when I relax them, I feel relieved, and at the same time, for some reason, it doesn't feel like I can get a complete breath when I relax them. And
Interesting.
So tensing them feels both like it helps me to stay upright, but then I also have this really tight psoas muscle,
mm-hmm.
and so I'm constantly curious about it. Is that something that while I'm sitting I could be relaxing or releasing?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll start with the first one because that one's simpler, and you asked it first. So, the answer to that question is when I'm sitting in a chair, I put my hands on my knees, but I don't think that in this instance there's a right or wrong thing to do. I think the important thing to note would be that your placement of your hands will affect the forward and backward, and potentially the side to side, depending on what you do with your hands. If you decide that you want to put one of your arms over here, obviously it's going to affect your body. So if you put your hands here while you're sitting in a chair, but you're sitting in something like full lotus when you're seated, and you don't put your hands there, your center may be slightly in a different place, like the place where you feel the most relaxed. Where your weight feels the most centered front and back. So in this case, there isn't a right way. Just understand that if you move them, there's a chance that your center may move slightly or a lot. So just pay attention to it and play around with it. So the second question, let me make sure that I remember it correctly. So you're asking if I engage my abs while sitting, because when you relax your abs, you feel like you can't breathe as well. You can't take as large of a breath.
Better in some respects, but I feel like I can't get a full breath.
Okay.
But it also, I think part of my being able to get, being tense and feeling like I can get a full breath is I'm kind of just breathing into my lungs and maybe not so much into my diaphragm.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
tense. And then when it opens up, it's like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't breathe down there.
So I'm going to start out with some theory, and then I'm going to start out with some practical experience that I can share with you, and then tell you I don't know the answer to your question. Does that sound good? All right. So in theory, from the Taoist perspective, which is the one I'm most familiar with, is that you can sit without using any muscle tension at all. That isn't true for breathing. So ultimately, in the standing postures that I talked about at the beginning, what you're trying to do there is learn to relax so your muscles are basically not engaged at all. It doesn't. When you move your arm, when you sit, when you do almost anything, you can move without using any type of muscle. But they do define the difference between tension and contraction. So tension is, so contraction would be what happens when your body breathes. You know, your belly moves up and down. Your muscles are being used, but tension is something that you can't let go of. So contraction in your abs is okay if you can tell the difference between contraction and tension. That would be a very helpful thing to recognize. And the way that you can tell that is by paying attention. If on the in-breath it's still tense, it's still engaged, it might be more towards tension than contraction. But I can't give you an experiential answer to that particular thing because I haven't explored it enough in my own body. The next thing that I can give you from practical experience is that, and from observation of others, is that most people that I'm around I've been around on a day-to-day basis before living at the monastery don't breathe with their abdomen very much. I've watched Soryu quite a bit, and when he's walking around or talking, his abdomen still moves in a way that mine certainly never did and sometimes doesn't. So I think you nailed it when you said that. But I would also, something that popped into my mind when you were asking the question is that oftentimes tension is layered. So it may be that I tense my abs because my hips hurt, and if I relax my abs, it makes me feel tense in a place in my body that I don't like, and I don't really want to feel, and then that may make me feel panic. So what might actually happen is that my relaxation level can increase. You know, I may relax my abs, but that may increase my access to feeling the tension in my hips, which then may cause a fear response, which may then make my breath shallower. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that's what's happening in your case. You should investigate through just watching what happens. But it's good to know that that kind of thing can happen, because it's a very strange experience to have something relax but then feel tighter somewhere else, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the tension actually increased. It just may mean that the awareness of the tension increased. But ultimately, I don't know. So, does that help?
Yes.
Just to review a little bit, do you feel like there's a better way? Is there a better way, or just like in terms of breathing into the chest, breathing into the belly, a combination of the two? Like, can we just sort of, do we try and favor one over the other, or it's just all a personal choice?
So once again, I'm going to give you a very similar process to her. I'm going to give you the theory. Right. I'm going to give you what I've experienced, and then tell you I don't know. Okay. So my teacher, my main teacher, Soryu, he trained in the Zen tradition, Rinzai Zen, and the main technique that he used for many of the years that he was there was a technique that is breathing into the abdomen. If you watch a newborn baby just laying on a table and you watch what happens, their belly moves quite a bit and their chest moves just a little bit. So theoretically, from what I've heard, it's much better to breathe in down here. From experience, I can tell you that when I started at this organization 2 years ago in the residency program, almost immediately Soryu moved me onto that technique, and it was very difficult from the first moment because I'm a very shallow breather, and my breath was almost entirely happening up here. I can tell you that when I started to breathe down here, it uncovered more tension than I could have imagined. My abs were tense, my lower back, my hips. It goes through my chest. And I noticed that when I started actually breathing down here, first of all, it was very painful. And I had to start engaging places in my body that I'm used to ignoring. And then it also, I noticed that the more that I actually breathed from down here, the more I would experience my body from an actual feeling standpoint. I noticed that, this is going to sound so strange to explain, but I actually couldn't tell the difference between thinking about breathing from my core and actually feeling it. So after a while of doing that, I started to be able to tell the difference some. And when that shift happened, when I became able to experience that, then I actually started to experience my body more. Breathing became more of a full body experience instead of something that just kind of happened in the background. Trying to think of how to put this. It brought up a lot of emotional discomfort. That was another thing. So it was both physical and emotional discomfort. Specifically for me, fear. So I would come up with reasons not to breathe that way. But after working with that technique for longer periods of time, I can tell you that my life in general is better when I breathe in that way. And I know that, and I still choose not to do it most of the time. So, I don't know.
I love that answer.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
you're very welcome.
I have a theory on the answer, but I'm just curious to get the actual answer.
This is our assistant teacher, but so he probably knows the answer already.
You've done more Qigong and Tai Chi than me. In terms of the standing posture, why do different standing poses instead of just doing the relaxed, no hands, Wuji posture?
How complicated of an answer would you like?
High complexity.
High complexity at a slow pace.
Okay. That's fair. Okay. So we'll start with the simple answer and get more complex.
Can you reiterate the question?
Why do you stand in different postures rather than just standing in what's called Wuji, which is just basically your arms are at your side and your knees are bent? The simplest answer is that different postures teach you different things about how your body works. Many Qigong systems are Taoist. There's also Buddhist and other forms that I'm not going to get into, but the thing that Taoism is really big on is yin and yang, however you want to differentiate those two. So Wu Wei or Wu and Wu Ji, two that come out of Tai Chi, are very yin postures. You're standing and you're doing, you're just letting your body stand in a very neutral position that's very absorbent. I don't know. Absorbent. Okay, there we go. So the posture that I showed comes from Xingyi Quan, which is a very yang martial art, whereas Tai Chi is very yin. So in that posture, everything is moving out from the body. The arms are moving away, the head's moving up, the spine is moving back. So the things that you're becoming closer in touch with in those postures are very different. Yang postures are very good at training focus. So you're looking to maintain an uninterrupted intent. You do that type of training through yang. if you're looking to, which it can relax the body, but it typically starts through tension. In Wu style postures or postures that are from different Tai Chi forms, you're typically training relaxation first and focused last. So you're doing the same thing, but you're doing it in a different order. If you look at the yin and yang symbol, there's a white dot in the middle of the black and a black dot in the middle of the white. So in in just a simple standing posture, you're typically training relaxation first and focus second. And in a yang style posture, you're doing the opposite. You're training focus first and relaxation second. And to give you another layer, in Tai Chi, traditional Tai Chi forms are taught 108 movements. And with that, you would, how Tai Chi was taught 100 years ago, 200 years ago, you would typically learn all 108 postures that go along with that. And the reason is that how your body produces power is different in, say, commencement, where your hands are out like this, versus when you're in single whip and your hands are like this. So the energy in your body and how your body is, when we played around with moving left and right, you're understanding that your body, in order to maintain its cohesion, has to adjust. So different postures are allowing you to understand how energy flows in your body, or how your body has strength in a different way. And there's also different emphases for different postures. So the three main emphases that come out of Tai Chi are fighting, so practical, how do I kill this person before they kill me? Then there's the healing, how do I make my body healthier and stronger? And then there's spiritual, so how do I realize the truth at a deeper level? And different postures, or even different ways of holding the same posture, can emphasize a different area of that. So that's probably as complex as I'm going to get right now. But if you have more questions. Okay. Was that?
I like that.
Great. Was that too complex?
No.
Okay. Great. Yep.
You said that what drove you to meditation practices was a desire to have a big spiritual experience, if I'm not wrong?
Yeah.
Can you define that? What does that mean to you?
To give you, to answer that question, I'm going to give you my frame of mind going into it. When I came to meditation, I'd spent several years drinking ayahuasca multiple to dozens of times a month.
Whoa.
So,
What is that?
huh?
What is it? What are you talking about?
Ayahuasca is it's a tea that's used in the Amazon jungle. By Western standards, it's called a hallucinogen. It's one of the oldest known forms of medicine on the planet. So depending on who you ask, some people will date it back over 5,000 years. Some people say 2,500. But it's it's known for having a tremendous impact on trauma and both physical and emotional healing. But it's also, I know a lot of people who have drank it. I've drank it quite a few times, and a very common thing that happens when people drink it is they have some sort of experience where they find God. When I drank it for the first time, I was a stone cold atheist. I didn't believe there was anything bigger than me or any higher intelligence, and very, very quickly I became humble enough to understand I was wrong. So going from that type of experience and just understanding that it's a very brutal experience, and that there's vomiting and there's pooping and shaking and crying, and I was looking for something that was more sustainable for my body long term. And I'd heard that you could do that through meditation, and then I started reading that you could do it through meditation. So when I was looking for the big spiritual experience, I was trying to find something like what I experienced on ayahuasca without having to drink a disgusting tea and then vomit it up in a room full of 30 of my closest friends. So.
And you did that
Do
several times.
you feel like you've succeeded?
I would say that I'm absolutely sure that what I'm doing here is the same thing that I was doing in the jungle. But they're very different ways of doing the same thing, in the same way that you can do a posture for different things. Ayahuasca's way of dealing with, say, fear or your trauma or anger or whatever is to make it really big so that you can see what's happening. Meditation does the opposite. You have to start to quiet down so you can listen to what's happening at a very subtle level. But ultimately, they can, as far as I can tell, I'm not going to say this universally,
Yeah.
but they have similar they have similar results from doing very different things.
That matches up with my experience. I've done ayahuasca 2 times, and
Okay,
that matches up quite nicely with my experience.
excellent,
Yeah.
great. It sounded like you had a question? Somebody, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, with what you just said, and in the context of the topic discussed, which is posture, I think it will be useful to say that in a Buddhism, which is actually the base of what we study in Monastic Academy, so in Japanese Zen Buddhism, one of the 2 main schools, and that's the other school, not the Rinzai school that our teacher trained into, but the Soto school of Zen Buddhism, the entire path of zero to the big spiritual experience is achieved by means of posture. Their meditative practice is called shikantaza in Japanese, and that means just sitting. So what you do, you just sit in a perfectly stable and centered posture, and you don't do anything else. What you do, you just aim at the right posture of all the time, and that's how you achieve everything. And that's actually school that it has a huge influence from Chinese philosophy of Tao. And in Tao, the main concept is what you mentioned as Wu Wei, as a posture. It's also a philosophical concept, and it means non-doing or doing nothing, Wu Wei. And the idea is that if you pursue something, this thing that you are pursuing, it's running away from you. While if you are doing nothing, you naturally achieve or receive that thing.
A very common saying used in Tai Chi around Wu Wei Wu, doing non-doing or doing without doing.
Yeah.
And that's like the, you watch me do Tai Chi and I'm definitely doing things, and then you watch Bruce do things and he's not doing anything. He's just kind of there. But it's still happening. And you can tell the difference. When he moves, it looks like he doesn't have bones, and when I move, it looks clunky and weird. So. We probably have time for one quick question if there's anything left. If not, we will move on. Rosie? Oh.
I noticed when moving forward, moving back, and side to side, that each time I felt my brain was telling me that I was more comfortable than I had been when I was centered. And even though I knew from this experience that after a minute it became really uncomfortable, I still had the same experience with each direction, where I'm like, oh yeah, this is better. Oh no, this is better.
Interesting.
So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts to why I had that experience.
So I'm probably going to answer this question a little bit different for a resident than I would for those of you who aren't residents. So the question that I have for you based on that is: was your body telling you that, or was your mind telling you that?
Definitely my mind.
Definitely your mind. That's
mine.
Yeah. So in this, if you remember me talking about going like this for an entire retreat, my mind didn't like that at all. But ultimately, there's a lot of wisdom in our body. Yoga and Tai Chi and many other things are built on that wisdom. And ultimately, to get to that wisdom, to some degree, you have to get out of your mind, which is something that I've spent thousands of hours in meditation because I have no idea how to do that. So, but the thing that we're looking for in this particular sense is is leaning to the left better? A good way to test that is spend an entire day sitting that way. And if after 3 hours you can't do it, and you have to go back to sitting a different way, and you want to try it, you should try it again the next day and see what happens. Because the places the way that our body is most helpful to be aligned is actually also the place that we're probably the most resistant to aligning it. We don't want our posture to be correct, because if we do, we have to face the truth. And in that sense, the truth might be pain physically or pain emotionally, or any way that we don't want to see ourselves that we are. So.
That's rings true for me.
Great, thank you.